Here.
Wynn,
Here.
Lamont,
Here.
and Wendland.
Here.
All right, we have a couple of public hearings, first of all, and the first one is a public hearing on
Mayor, if I could interrupt just briefly, we do have some citizen comment this afternoon.
oh, we do, good.
We do. We have two people that have requested an opportunity to speak this afternoon.
Good.
The first one is Matt Hutchison, and he requested that his brief comment be read into the record. So we'll start with that. Our agreement, this is regarding the Republic Services item on your agenda today. Our agreement to only be serviced by Republic Services for roll-off yard debris garbage containers is not acceptable. Their costs and customer service are completely out of line with other options in the area. Thank you. And now we should have our second person. Rob Monaghan has joined the meeting to provide comment. And sir, you are ready to go. You have 3 minutes to speak. And I'm going to go ahead and hold up a timer for you.
Great, thank you. Hello, everyone. Appreciate your time and being able to join the meeting. Apologize for my camera angle. I have a laptop that decided to put the camera by the keyboard. Anyway, briefly about me and why I am calling in today. I'm an 11-year resident here of Lake Oswego. I currently live in the Evergreen neighborhood with my wife and 2 children. Both are enrolled at LO schools. My wife and I, a couple of years ago, started the redevelopment of the former Firestone Tire Center at 5th and A, and then leased the property to the current operator, Duke's Public House. Redevelopment was a major investment in both the building as well as the required public improvements on and around the property. We have a great sense of pride in how the property turned out and feel in some way we were able to improve a small corner of the city for all to enjoy. Currently, our tenant, as well as many other restaurant operators in the area, are facing a grim winter due to the operational challenges with the COVID-19 pandemic. As you may or may not have read, prominent restaurant operators in Portland are referring to this upcoming season as a nuclear winter for restaurants. I'm calling in today to support the staff recommendation for regulatory relief for certain types of commercial uses during COVID-19. I would like to make some brief points regarding the staff comments and suggest some additional measures. A May 31st timeline is referenced and appears to be a fair and realistic deadline for an initial phase for the ordinance. I would like to suggest that flexibility be given to restaurants to utilize public parking adjacent to their operations for outdoor seating in covered areas. This has been done successfully in Portland and other cities. I would like to suggest that setback requirements be reduced to match setback requirements for surface parking when an awning, canopy, or tent be adjacent to a residential lot. Currently at Duke's in particular, a setback requirement for such a structure is 25 feet. Given the small size of the lot and walkways for access, this leaves very little area to create cover. Additionally, I would like to suggest that tenants be able to apply directly for these uses without a property owner having to reopen or vary any previous land use decisions. Currently, the only way we could have a variance to the setback would be for me to reopen a land use decision that was approved 1.5 years ago. And lastly, there's a comment in the staff comments that tenants would have to assume the risk of having an awning or canopy that is not in compliance and removed. I just suggest that there be a window of time given to tenants to remove the structure without penalty. And that's all. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Questions? Yes, Councilor Lamont.
Rob, first of all, thank you for investing in our community. You and Dukes did a great job on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
To clarify, some of the restaurants are a little closer to residential than the 25 feet, including your property. And that's what you're trying to do, is just say, let's be flexible for some of those unique situations. Is that correct?
Correct. And some of this was discovered by accident. The tenant had put up a canopy that they had not had permitted. You'll probably notice it's been taken down.
Mhm.
And now to try to permit that and put it back up,
Mhm.
the setback requirement next to the residential lot is 25 feet.
Right. It
We
doesn't
have-
work. Right.
Yeah, we have a 10-foot landscape barrier already there. I'd say our setback is probably 12 feet with that canopy as it was designed.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Great work. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Monahan, thank you. We'll see how this comes out tonight.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other people who want to make public comment, Madam Recorder?
No, Mayor, that's the end of citizen comment for this afternoon.
Okay, then we'll get into the first public hearing, which is regarding the special procurement process for telemetry. And
Thank you, Mayor. This is the time for hearing on Resolution 20-32, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Lake Oswego, acting as the Lake Oswego Public Contract Review Board pursuant to ORS 279A060, adopting findings, approving a special procurement of a design-build contract for telemetry system upgrades, and exempting the contract from competitive solicitation in order to negotiate a design-build contract with Portland Engineering, Inc. We'll begin with a staff report and any testimony of the public. Time limits are up to 10 minutes for representatives of recognized neighborhood associations, homeowners associations, government agencies, or other incorporated public interest organizations, and 5 minutes for other individuals, followed by questions of staff and potentially a decision. Ask at this point if any council member needs to make a declaration related to conflict of interest. And hearing no declarations, Mayor, we'd be ready for the staff report.
Good evening, or good afternoon, I guess it still is, Mayor and council members. I'm Erica Rooney, the city engineer responsible for the engineering department and the water treatment plant. Today with us, we have Carrie Duncan, our water treatment plant manager, and Stefan Broadus, the assistant city engineer. They're going to do a presentation about the project as a whole. I'm just going to give a quick overview. Just as a reminder, the project that we're going to be talking about today is a project we've had in our CIP for several years, and finally it's coming to fruition, which is a good thing to see us finally getting to this project. It's long overdue, so we're anxious to get started on it. But what we wanted to bring to you today is specifically around special procurement process, which is outlined in the staff report, and Stefan's going to go over that in a little bit more detail as well. So I'll let them do the presentation, and I'm excited to get this started because this will be a great help for both Carrie's folks and our folks in Public Works out at the maintenance center who interact on a daily basis between the water treatment plant and our distribution system. So with that, I'll turn it over to Stefan. He's got a very short presentation about the project and about the procurement process. Thank you.
Mr. Broadus, you'll have to unmute yourself. It's still, there you go. Nope, can't hear you yet. Nope. Aren't computers wonderful?
We'll come up with the solution here in just a second. He's pretty good. Yeah.
Getting a new city hall might help. No, I'm just kidding.
And Marie, I think he's going to log in on a new device.
Yes, I am watching for him.
Yeah, thank you.
Is P&E, the engineers, the same one who are working on his system?
Hello.
There we
Better?
go.
That's
Okay.
it.
So
You're there.
sorry about that. So sorry about that. But I'm here now. I have a brief presentation, as Erica mentioned, in which I'm going to basically share two things. The first of which is just a brief background into telemetry. So what is telemetry for our water system? And then the second item is a little bit more information on the procurement that we are requesting this afternoon. So my next technological challenge will be to try to share my screen. Hopefully it goes over better than my audio.
Yes, it did.
Okay, good. Okay, thank you so much. So again, as far as some background into telemetry goes, I have a simple schematic shown on the screen here. And what this is symbolizing is the water treatment plant on the left and a two-way communication system with our water system assets on the right. So we have our water reservoirs as well as our pump stations. And so what this communication system enables us to do is allows for our operators at the water treatment plant to remotely monitor the levels and the status and the condition of our infrastructure out throughout the city, and then adjust the performance accordingly, all from the water treatment plant. And so for a couple of examples of what this equipment looks like on the screen now, three pictures. On the left is the antenna at the Kerr Road pump station. And then in the top right, we have the new remote terminal unit, or RTU, at the Beluga Reservoir. And then finally at the bottom right, we have our existing telemetry panel at Palisades Reservoir. So, so now that you kind of have a sense for what telemetry is and just a few examples of what the equipment looks like, a bit of background on how we arrived at this project is, as you well are aware, we had a update to the Water System Master Plan in 2018. And as a part of that update to the Master Plan, the existing telemetry system was inspected to get an idea as to the current functionality, reliability, and condition of all these components. And what those inspections showed is that these old radios and associated electronic equipment are reaching the end of life and should be replaced. And so at that time, receiving those recommendations and building that into the Water System Master Plan, engineering adopted a capital improvement plan, one of which project is the upgrade of this system, which is funded for this fiscal year. So it was identified in the master plan, and we acted accordingly by planning and budgeting for the project. And we are just working that plan with this request today. And so the next question may be, well, with this equipment reaching the end of life, what does that mean? What risk does that pose? So when this equipment fails, and we are already experiencing some of those failures now, essentially our operators are running the system blind. So we have no remote indication of what our water levels are in our reservoir. We have no remote ability to operate our pumps. And so what risk this poses is the potential for our reservoirs to overflow potentially. And that can cause a waste of water, obviously, but also some erosion in the surrounding areas from that overflow, and also potential to overwhelm the adjacent storm system. So it's a serious risk that's posed when these reservoirs overflow. There's also the risk of the opposite problem, which would be unintentionally draining a reservoir, which can cause water quality issues, We can have lost pressure in the system, resulting in a boil water notice, all of these things that we are also trying to avoid. So those are kind of big picture risks that losing communication poses. Often when we do lose that communication, we will send our operators and our water treatment plant staff out into the field, into these reservoirs, to the pump stations to operate the equipment essentially manually by taking manual readings at the site in order to make those sound decisions on how to operate the infrastructure. So it's also one of our leading causes of off-hour callouts for our staff. So that's one thing that will also be able to significantly reduce by upgrading this telemetry equipment. So now that you have an idea of what the telemetry system does and the risk that it poses by it being outdated, I wanted to speak a little bit about the procurement, and the procurement really is two pieces of it. It's why progressive design build, and then second, why specified source. So the first of these, why progressive design build instead of typical design bid build. So unlike a lot of utility construction in our industry where you would follow a design bid build, whereas the design is performed by professional engineering consultants, and then you procure that out as to a low bid process for contractors to bid and complete the work. Telemetry equipment is really designed and installed by the same people. So the same people that would be designing and specifying which equipment to use, how to install it, where to install it, all of those details would typically be the same people that would ultimately install it, configure it, implement it. And so it really doesn't align as well with a design bid build system. It makes much more sense for one firm to do all of those things. And so the second question, why specified source? So why Portland Engineering Inc.? So Portland Engineering Incorporated is uniquely qualified. They have a history and an intimate knowledge of our system, our city of Lake Oswego local requirements, as well as just our business processes and workflows. And so PEI is going to be uniquely qualified to perform this work, so much so that a competitive process would have been inefficient as far as the timing of the schedule goes in order to do that, as well as they are clearly the most qualified candidate that would submit a proposal for this project, and any other candidate not only would not have that knowledge to begin with, but would take time and money in order to essentially get to the same place that PEI is already at. And so for those reasons, we bring forward this request for special procurement here today. And with that, I will open it up to any questions that you may have.
Questions, anybody? Stephen, I have just one question, and that is, what would you guess would be the life of this equipment that you're installing now?
The new equipment, that's a great question. And I don't have a great answer offhand. I don't know if Carrie, if you know something, or we can come back at a later date.
Yeah, let's get Carrie to do that.
Yes, Mayor, typically equipment like this will last between, let's say, 20, possibly 30 years. It isn't, because it's like getting a new computer, and obviously our desktop computers don't last nearly as long as that, but a typical lifespan of equipment like this is about 20 years.
Okay.
And that's about as old as our existing system is approximately 20 to 25 years old. and now it's time to replace it.
Thank you. Other questions, anybody? Councilor Mann?
Yes, I have a couple of questions. The first one is, will this be a shared cost with Tigard on the Lake, for the Lake Oswego Tigard Water Partnership? That's question one. Then tying into that, do we have some idea of the budgeted cost for that? I'm so sorry, I should know this being on the oversight committee, but thought I'd ask it out loud in case others were thinking of it.
So to answer your second question first, the order of magnitude cost, it's in the CIP now, budgeted for $500,000.
Okay.
And then I was just going to say, and Gary or Erica, you could probably answer the question about the partnership better than me.
Yeah, Councilor Mann's, the partnership, this is not a partnership cost. Although the system is operated out of the water treatment plant, all of the equipment serves the Lake Oswego distribution system only. And so that is a Lake Oswego only cost.
Thank you.
Councilor Nguyen? Councilor Nguyen?
Thank you there. Sorry about that. Trying to unmute here. Stefan, thank you for your very thorough report. I want to talk a little more about, so your request is that you'd like us as council to.
I just, it gave me access. I went in and and I had to enter all that information. And
Is there somebody not off mute or?
And I don't know if that's right from.
I'm sorry, was there a question?
Yeah, it sounds like there's some cross noise that's happening. It sounds like it might be in
Stefan,
your office, Stefan.
if he can mute for a minute. Thank you.
Okay, try again.
Okay, can you hear me now? Okay, so Stefan, thank you for your very thorough report. I want to talk about this whole idea about coming to council and asking us to approve these alternative procurement processes. I know that we, as as the kind of the contract review board, that we review these contracts, but I'm not quite convinced that that we've, we're allowing other businesses and other firms to competitively bid on this. I know that the city's been working out with this particular firm for over 10 years, and of course they're going to have the upper hand because they know everybody here and they know the systems here. So I think, as we go forward, I'd like to see us figure out how do we bring other people to the table, other firms that maybe they're just as qualified, but because they don't have the inside advantage by having worked with the city for over 10 years, I don't want to automatically exclude other firms that that may be just as qualified. It's just that they don't know anybody here and they haven't worked with the city before. I know that the idea is that we're going to save time and energy and money, but I think also it shouldn't just be that. I think that if we're going to be serious about thinking about how do we build the bench, right? I mean, I guess what I'm getting at is that how do we start to diversify more of the businesses that can do business with the city of Lake Oswego. Seems like there's a handful of firms that are the preferred firms, and the default is that, well, since they've been with the city for so long, they know it. It's easy for staff and easier for everybody involved that we don't have to re-explain ourselves. But in any case, I think that we need to be more. My feeling is that we need to kind of review this, not automatically hand out these contracts to firms that have an inside track already. So I guess that's more of a comment and not so much a question. But I guess the question would be to you, Stefan, is that if there were other firms that may be similarly qualified but may lack the direct experience with the city and the history with the city, are there any other firms out there?
Gary.
Not that I'm. Yeah.
So I can try to answer that. There are other firms that do the type of telemetry and programming type work that we're talking about. I think specifically the recommendation to work with PEI was because they had programmed the existing system at the treatment plant and did have a vast amount of knowledge and programming information for what we're working with here.
Councilor Nguyen, I would just add that there's really, as far as procurement of our capital projects go, there's really two major types. One would be projects in which it's almost a continuation of something that's already been developed and established, and that's what this project is. And that is overwhelmingly the minority of our types of projects. The vast majority of our projects are projects in which there's a component to design and then ultimately build, but there's not necessarily any background information necessary that would make any one firm uniquely qualified. And so I think to your question, you know, how do we make sure that that new businesses have the opportunities to bid on our projects? I think it's by maintaining that split. We have a very select few projects in which it makes extraordinary sense for the city, both time and money, in order to do a special procurement. But then a vast majority of our projects are completely open procurement, in which new companies simply need to get involved in order to have an opportunity to do business with the city.
Yeah. My feeling is I feel like that we should at least put out a request for qualifications. And if there's no other firms beyond PEI responds, then it's very clear. But unless we put out some sort of request for, hey, who out there does this work, make your case, and see if you're qualified. But I'm not comfortable just putting out there and saying that, you know, that because we work with them, then they should get this, that we should have an inside track. So that's kind of how I'm feeling, is that at least we already went to the effort of posting a public notice in the Daily Journal of Commerce. That'd be the same place you post a request for qualifications too. So if we just took one step, put it out there, and if nobody responds, then I would feel more confident that that we move in this direction. But at least you got to give people a shot.
I would say this, just Council Nguyen, I would say in the last 7.5 years, these two contracts, which are design build, are probably about one of the few contracts I've ever seen where we've had design build. The rest of them has all been design, bid, build. So I don't think this is happening very often. But Councilor Kohlhoff, you had a question or a statement.
Well, I did, because we had these back to back. And my question was, I wasn't as, I mean, I had the same concerns that Councilor Nguyen had. I was less concerned about this particular one than I am the one that's coming up, in that I assumed that, and tell me if I'm right, that this is an area where there's a special expertise. And my sense was, because of that, you felt that this particular firm would be both economical as well as, you know, able to slip in and do the work in a way that a competitor firm wouldn't. And I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, because what I'm going to say then the next hearing is the same question. What is it, what special expertise, if at all, would you be relying on to skip that one step that Councilor Nguyen is talking about the bid part?
So the two are different. This is a direct contract award, and the second is a design build method. So you'll still be doing a competitive solicitation on the second one. So don't get them confused.
Well, but you're not going to have a bid. You're going to have a design. You're going to have a design build on the
yes.
second one.
And if I'll write down your question, we'll hold it for the second one, but I don't want you to confuse the two.
Okay, but then at least let's answer my question as it relates to this particular one. Is there that element? Are you looking to an element of expertise to justify skipping the bid portion of the design build? That's my question.
Yes, because we have, this contractor has been through a a current service contract to help repair our system. They've been repairing our system as it's breaking, and as Stefan described, we've had a variety of failures, and they have been going out there and helping us piece by piece repair one by one, so that there is some particular expertise here when we look at the replacement of the system.
Yeah, and go ahead.
Councilor Wendland?
So to get this, if I understand it, you're proposing a brand new system though, right? I mean, so are they looking at competitive options out there so that we're getting the best pricing? And what I worry about is in the CPI, we've said it's going to be $500,000 now. So what if it was on the open bid process and somebody said hey, I can do this for 300,000, but this firm says I can do it for 500,000. I'm going to put it in as 499, 999, and I'm going to hit that number. How do we come up with $500,000 to start with? And is that a realistic price, or are they just going to engineer their bid or their process to come up with 500,000 because that's what we have allocated? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense, and that's a good question. So to start with, where did the cost estimate come from? The cost estimate comes from the Water System Master Plan, in which the consultants who prepare that, different consultants, base that on their knowledge of industry, standard, typical order of magnitude cost for a system like this. Your next question is basically, how do we know they won't essentially reverse engineer the cost to come up $1 shy of $500,000? It's basically because the cost that would be paid from the city to the vendor here would be based on a combination of a couple of things. It would be their time, so their professional services, and then it would be the equipment itself. Now, the equipment itself still needs to be competitively procured. So even though we would be, our vendor would be buying the equipment and we would be reimbursing them as the contract allows, they would still be buying it in a competitive manner. It's similar to the way City Hall is being constructed, and the subcontractors to the prime are competitively procured.
And we don't pay a
If
markup.
that makes sense.
Yeah, we don't pay a markup then for their purchases.
There's an allowable markup, but there's an allowable markup in any type of procurement, the public procurement process. So design, bid, build process, there's a markup that you would pay on items in that procurement method too. So there's always a markup.
And you feel they're reasonable, that that would be competitive or under customary practices?
I think so. And the one advantage that we have with this design bid approach, with the progressive design build approach, is it's going to be broken up into two phases. The first phase is essentially just the planning and design component of it, in which they will be providing us a cost to design the new system and say you should get these components, you should install them in this configuration, and this will enable you to meet all your goals as a city. At that point, we can have the option to say, thank you very much. We would now like to take this in a design bid build approach. So it gives us what they call an off-ramp if we want to go down a traditional route, or they can also provide us with a proposal, guaranteed maximum price proposal, similar to a traditional design build. So we have that flexibility built in, but it's expected that phase one would yield a design that would meet the goals and requirements of the city, and that the consultant would put together a competitive proposal that we would then move forward with. That would be the expected route. But yes, there's mechanisms in there to ensure that their pricing is competitive.
Councilor Mott?
So following Councilor Wendland's question, the 500,000 is for design and engineering only. Any product that comes out later?
No, so the 500,000 is the estimated cost for the system, basically a turnkey system. At the end of the 500,000, our system would be online and operational.
So equipment, computers, software, hardware, all that would be part of that. And
Yes, sir.
knowing that we are trying to get a tradition of looking at, do we hire in-house or out-of-house? This is so sophisticated a need that we couldn't hire one engineer or two engineers to run this. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Councilor Wynn?
Just one last question. So the reason why, again, I'm just, I want to ask about this particular telemetry system and such, you know, the current system we have right now is 20 years old, and lots have happened in terms of technology in the past 20 years. During one of our early council goals discussions was this talk about smart cities. I don't think it ever made it onto one of our council goals, but I think this would be a perfect candidate. If we're going to talk about smart cities and talks about automation of systems and such, I think it'd be worth, you know, talking to firms that if they want to bid on this project, saying, what can you, and maybe put it into the RFQ, you know, what would you do different? You know, how would you make this part of this new, you know, this is they call the IoT, the Internet of Things, right? And so how are we, you know, this would be a perfect candidate for one of those systems we were talking about, smart cities automating the city, because this is one of our main services that we as the city provide. I mean, it's a utility, right? So again, I just feel like if we were to, you know, rush to award this contract, I'm afraid that, you know, that we may not get the full picture to see what the full review, what's available out there. We want the latest and greatest, but also the flexibility to integrate, because I think we've done that with our, you know, our water meter reading systems, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. And so again, I just feel like for our benefit, if we were to at least look at other firms and see if they want the business bad enough, what else they can propose. But again, I look at this as this is a huge component. If we're going to talk about smart cities, this would be the perfect candidate for such a project. So I'll leave it at that.
I think that's a great point, and I think it's interesting because water system telemetry systems, they're kind of like the original smart city. That's kind of the you know, before, you know, 20 years before the term smart city was ever coined, we were doing things that you think of when you think of smart cities, remotely controlling assets instead of driving there to figure them out. I think that you speak of, you know, next generation or what are current technology, what are the capabilities of current technology. It's important to note that the vendor that we are suggesting that we partner with here is not the material provider. They are they're a designer, and so any technology that is available in this industry will be fair game for us, and we will look at. So everything is on the table right now as far as what technology we end up choosing and we end up installing, and it will very much be aligned with smart city aspirations. Absolutely.
Councilor Mans?
Yeah. Final question. Portland Engineering is obviously a local company. I would assume they're not a subsidiary of a large conglomerate. Are they?
No,
No, they're
they're
local.
not. They're small local company.
So you would call them maybe a small to mid-size business, insofar as they, like I say, are not a subsidiary of Siemens or a gigantic company.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions? Okay, then let's see if there's anybody that wants to testify in favor of this resolution. This is a public hearing, Mr. Powell, correct? Can you hear
Mayor
me?
Studebaker, nobody has requested an opportunity to provide testimony on this item today.
Is there anybody that wants to testify against this resolution?
No, sir.
Okay, then I'll make a motion to approve resolution 20-32. Do I have to read this whole thing, Mr. Powell? All right. Is there a second? All right. We've had Councilor Mann's second. Any further discussion? All right, would you call a roll, please, Madam Recorder?
Yes, Mayor Studebaker,
Yes.
Councilor Mans,
Yes.
Kohoff,
Yes.
O'Neill,
Yes.
Nguyen,
No.
Lamont,
Yes.
and Woodland.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-1.
Now let's go on to the next public hearing, which is regarding resolution 20-35 regarding the golf course.
Thank you, Mayor. As you mentioned, this is a public hearing on Resolution 20-35, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Lake Oswego, acting as Lake Oswego Public Contract Review Board pursuant to ORS 279A.060, adopting findings and approving a special procurement of a design-build contract for renovation of the Lake Oswego Municipal Golf Course. Again, the process will be a staff report as before, followed by testimony. Time is 10 minutes for representatives of recognized neighborhood associations, homeowners associations, government agencies, or other incorporated public interest organizations. 5 minutes for other individuals, followed by any questions of staff. Once again, I ask if any city council member wants to make any declarations relating to conflict of interest. And hearing none again, Mayor, we're ready for the staff report.
All right. Mr. Vanderhold, welcome.
Good afternoon, Mayor and City Councilors. Ivan Anderholm, Parks and Recreation Director. I'm here before you to talk about Resolution 2035. It's an alternative procurement authorization for renovation of the municipal golf course to a design build. In looking at this, and you have the report before you, as we were doing research into the design build or design bid build process for a golf course and consulting with numerous golf designers, both local and nationally, we found that about 95% of all golf courses are built in a manner that's consistent with design build. The uniqueness of golf course design and build is a little bit more complicated than what we would see in a traditional park build, which we've done. Most of our contracts are design bid build. And in this, we found that there are some very applicable criteria for wanting to do a design build in this approach. First and foremost is the uniqueness of golf courses in the agronomy, both with the soil type, slope, drainage, is very specific to ensure the quality of the golf course. And in that, we find that every property that you build on or have unique circumstances that cannot always be accounted for when you're drafting on an engineering table and design table, and that adjustments are needed routinely in the field. This differs significantly from building a park in that the interaction between people using the course or using a park is slightly different and is definitely a prescribed feel when you get into a golf course. The design build also in this case, as council is aware and the mayor is aware, this case we are going to be on a very fixed budget in which we have to accomplish a very complicated process of taking a par 3 18-hole course with slope and converting that into a unique golf experience or a 9-hole executive course. And in doing that, we need to be very cognizant of what the cost can be and be able to have not just the design professionals up front, but also have involvement in our agronomists as well as our construction folks from the very beginning, so that we don't get surprised with conditions further down the road. So we believe that this design build will better help us control the costs of the project to bring in a meaningful project on budget and in time. Secondarily is in these, and as we researched the field of golf course design and building, we found that there is a great efficiency that comes in having your contractor working with your designers and your agronomists from the first step of the project. And where this really tells is when initial golf course layout and conditions, especially in conditions where there's a lot of rain, like in the Northwest, where drainage is very important. Oftentimes, engineers can come up with what a drainage plan is, but oftentimes we find in the contracting world that the contractors with their practical experience can make modifications to that both save money, save time, and save headaches. So with that, I'd be willing to answer any questions you might have about this process, with just adding one more thing after listening to the last hearing that you had. This is fairly different in that we're not looking at just naming a contractor to perform the work. We are doing a request for proposals where we will both be looking at qualifications, experience, and like projects that have been completed, both here in the Northwest and also throughout the United States. So with that, I'll answer any questions you might have.
Councilor Lamont.
Ivan, this is similar to the approach you're using with our trail consultant builder, which I think is great because you're right, it's got to be dealt with in the field more than most construction. So the question I have, and if you can broad brush some of the timing, I think we also save time with design build in my experience. When would we get this going, and is there any chance to kind of capture some of the work during the winter before golf season picks up again in the spring? Or just, it's what it is, it's going to take its time.
So you bring up a good highlight. One of the advantages of the design build is that we can coordinate the schedule, and knowing that there's going to be activity taking place at the golf course for the Recreation Aquatic Center, the ability to coordinate schedule and work schedule is important. Unfortunately, the work that can be done is a lot of the siting work and geotechnical in the wetter months. The golf course itself, it is preferred that that work is done in the drier times just because of efficiency of moving soil. If you start moving heavy wet soil, you get bogged down and you're not able to shape adequately. So the time frame would be a time frame where it's actually, we will lose a season of golf during the construction of this when we get into construction. And primarily that is so that the new fairways can be form shaped, the new greens, tee boxes, and irrigation can be developed. And then toward the end of the growing season is where they actually come in and plant and grass the facility. Grass is over the fall into the winter and through the spring, and then essentially you can open the following summer. So it's really a shutdown of May until June. It is kind of how the shutdown period goes. And of course there's variables with the weather and that, but generally that's what the schedule that we're seeing would most likely look like. So with the design build, we can coordinate that with the construction schedule for the Recreation Aquatic Center.
You mean May until June, 13 months later?
Yes, 13 months later, exactly, yes.
Councilor Qualhoff, did you have a question?
So let me see if I understood you correctly. Basically, the bid comes first, and so you're bidding a company who will then design and build it.
Yes, and then there's a couple steps to the process. The first step is that we negotiate the phase one costing, which is primarily the design engineering costing of it. Phase 2 is where we negotiate a maximum price, guaranteed maximum price for construction and development. So it's very similar to what you saw in, not as complex, but similar to what you saw in the City Hall project. And at that point, right now, what we're doing is looking for authorization to move in that direction. It also gives City Council the opportunity to weigh in at the initial selection of the contract, and then again at guaranteed maximum price.
Mayor, I had one other question.
That's fine, go ahead.
So I'm still not quite clear how this golf project fits in with the pool. Is that something that doesn't matter, that you could go ahead and do separately before the pool has its completion? In other words, you're trying to fit into one spot, two separate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's part of it is the coordination. So the likelihood of us, because there's a large amount of public engagement that'll have to happen with the golf course. We obviously want to talk to our golf community about what they want the course to look like and the finer details of that. So there's still public outreach and design process that needs to go into the golf course. We are not set on a date of construction at this point, being next summer or the following summer, because the public engagement process is going to lead us to the process for which that happens. The site up here is segmented into two maximum, the line between the Recreation Aquatic Center and the golf course project is a very definite line, which is the maximum extent of either project. So that line basically separates the two projects. However, because we're going to be coexisting on one site, there is coordination, and coordination was built into the design contract that we just recently signed for the Recreation Aquatic Center. And there is a provision for coordination, would be a provision in coordination for the golf course design. When we're talking about addressing on-site stormwater, and then also how the two environments interact when they cross over that. So there will be coordination between the two teams, so that it looks like a seamless one project. However, we did find that the from the golf perspective, it is a very specific process that most courses are developed under, and it's a team approach, including the contractor, design, agronomists, and irrigation specialists.
Councilor Mann.
Yes, I'm looking at our CIP this time, and I see we have budgeted 2.5 million for the golf course. This number, of course, was developed a couple of years ago, as we're now in a biennium budget. In your best estimate, are we still working within that confines of that number, or?
I think that the realistic number is going to be somewhere between 2.5 and 3 for everything, and that includes re-netting and redeveloping the driving range netting. So I would say 3 is the top end of that. In our conversation during conceptual and our initial public outreach with the golf community, we did have a local golf designer come and talk to us, and I think that he had an opportunity to speak to a couple of the counselors at an open forum and felt very comfortable with the $3 million amount for the full renovation, including design, construction, and the driving range.
Thank you.
Councilor Wendland.
I would just like to reiterate what Director Anderholm said. I was part of numerous meetings in the golf course, and both to affirm that this bidding process is normal, which a couple of people brought this question up when we had the open forums, and this is kind of how the industry does it. And also that we were talking about a $3 million number, and that they felt they could easily give us a good product for $3 million. So with everything. And it will still include when the Parks and Rec department leaves their building, that the offices that I've been sitting in, will be able to rededicate that space to other things. So the original golf course clubhouse will still stay where it is under the new design.
Further question? All right.
Can I move to adopt resolution 20? Wait, we have a
other testimony if there is. Ms. Simpson, do you have anybody that wants to testify in favor of this resolution?
No, Mayor, nobody has requested time to speak in favor or against this resolution tonight.
All right. Now, Mr. Wendland, go ahead.
On behalf of the Golf Association, no, I just kidding. I move to adopt resolution 20-35, adopting findings authorizing a design build contract for the Lake Oswego Municipal Golf Course Renovation Project.
Second.
Any further discussion? All right, hearing none. Madam Recorder, will you call the roll, please?
Yes, Mayor Studebaker.
Yes.
Councilors Mans,
Yes.
Kohlhoff,
Yes.
O'Neill,
Yes.
Nguyen,
Yes.
Lamont,
Yes.
and Wendland.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
All right,
Thank
next
you.
item is study sessions. We have 3 or 4 study sessions, well, 2 study sessions. The first is with Melissa Kelly and Allison Arnold regarding DEI, which is diversity, inclusion, and equity. Hello, Ms. Kelly.
Thank you, Mayor and councilors. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Wonderful. Give me just a moment here. I'm going to share my screen with you. And hopefully you're starting to see a PowerPoint come up with a green screen there. Okay, good. Well, it is a pleasure to be presenting to you today on the progress of the events calendar project in support of your 2020 council goal to increase the diversity of people serving on city boards, commissions, and committees and employed by the city of Lake Oswego to meet the needs of all the city's residents. And the specific task was to develop a calendar of events to celebrate cultural and religious diversity. And after being assigned this project, staff developed a work plan. Step 1 was to gather community data. Step 2, inventory established cultural and religious events to identify gaps and opportunities. Step 3, implement outreach strategies for inclusive representation. Step 4, analyze community data and develop findings. Step 5, present findings and an initial recommendation of events to council, which is why I'm here before you today. Step 6 is to integrate your feedback and revise the plan as necessary. And step 7 is to collaborate between departments to deliver and promote events. With me today is Megan Phelan, our Assistant City Manager, and Allison Arnold, Library Reference Manager. Allison's team led the demographic research and outreach for this project. So she's here today to answer any detailed questions you may have. So without further ado, let's take a look at the community data. And here on the first slide, you will see race data for the Lake Oswego city from the US Census. And just generally, the demographic data shows that our community is home to people of many cultural and religious backgrounds. As you can see from this first slide, our racial diversity is limited, with 86% of the population identifying as white. But other layers of diversity do become more apparent as we will look at the languages spoken and national origins of our foreign-born population. So as you can see, we have 86% identifying as white, 5.2% identifying as Hispanic or Latinx, 3.8% of the population identifying as belonging to 2 or more races, 0.7% of residents identifying as Black or African American, 0.6% identifying as American Indian, and 0.4% identifying as Pacific Islander. And to put that a little bit of context for you, 0.7% of our 39 thousand population is nearly 300 residents. Next, I'm going to show you the race demographics looking at the school district data. This came from the Oregon Department of Education profile. And this slide shows that 73% of the students enrolled in the school district in Lake Oswego identify as white, 10% identify as Asian, 9% identify as multiracial, 7% as Hispanic Latinx, 1% identify as Black African American, and less than 1% each for American Indian Alaska Native and Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander. Next, I'm going to show you a slide of the place of birth for the foreign-born population of Lake Oswego residents. So 10.7% of our residents are foreign-born. 3.9% are born in Asia, 2.5% born in Europe, and 1.2% born in Latin America. And when we look at languages spoken in the city, it's really interesting. 13.2% of residents speak a language other than English at home. 3.4% speak Spanish at home. 3.9% speak an Asian or Pacific Island language at home. And 5.5% speak an Indo-European language other than English at home. So we have, of our total population of over 39,000 residents, over 1,000 or 2.7% of our population identified that they speak English less than very well. So we do have about 1,000 members of our community that probably are having trouble reading our materials that are only issued in English. So that's a goal that we have been talking about addressing here for the future going forward. We have another slide that talks about languages spoken by students in the school district. I'm sorry that this is a data heavy slide, but I just wanted you to see all of these languages that are being spoken in our school district. So on the left-hand column, we have languages spoken by 5 or more students. And in the right-hand column, languages spoken by fewer than 5 students. But overall, more than 30 languages spoken by students in our school district. Really awesome to see. We also looked at the religious denominations that Lake Oswego is home to. And we did this by inventorying the places of worship and the institutions that are located here in the city. So we found that there are 18 places of worship that are Christian denominations, that's 82%. We have 1 Jewish place of worship, 1 Buddhist place of worship. We do not have an Islamic place of worship here, but we assume that there are residents that are associated with the Islamic religion. And we also have 2 places of worship that we categorize as other, the Baha'i Center and the New Thought Center for Spiritual Living. So that just gives a brief overview of the demographic data here for the city. And after collecting this data, we prepared for the next steps, community outreach and making an inventory of the current events here in the city. And throughout the project, we kept in mind the goals of the project: to increase the awareness of cultural and religious diversity of residents, to celebrate the richness of diversity in Lake Oswego, to include all members of the community, and to highlight and create opportunities to build cultural competencies. You'll see here an image from Multicultural Children's Book Day at the library this year, before COVID came and disrupted our lives. So staff contacted local organizations to learn about annual cultural and religious events and the potential for future events, including the Baha'i Center, Beit Havarim, the Chinese American International School, the Chinese Council of Lake Oswego, the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde, Mary's Woods, Respond to Racism, and the SGI USA Oregon Buddhist Center. And it should be noted that 2020 has been a challenging time to do this work, to connect with people and to make an inventory of events, because our routines are very disrupted right now as a result of COVID. Still, we did our best and had many meaningful conversations. And our outreach resulted in a long list of potential events to celebrate the cultural and religious diversity of our community. Many of the representatives expressed how meaningful it would be to see their cultural holidays and events reflected in our city calendar. So staff are collaborating to accomplish this. And now for the inventory of events. So these are current city-sponsored cultural and religious events. We have Christmas events, including the Tree Lighting Festival, the Holiday Concert, and the Tinseltown Trolley. Our Independence Day events, the Star Spangled Parade and Celebration. We have Chinese New Year events. The library and Chinese American International School have partnered, and students from CAIS wear native costumes and share songs, dance, and poetry at the library, and cultural crafts for children are provided. And Multicultural Children's Book Day events. The library participates in this global celebration that shines a spotlight on diversity in children's and young adult literature. And this past year was a special year for Multicultural Children's Book Day. We invited members of our community that we see in the children's library on a weekly basis that we heard speaking languages other than English, and invited them to share their language, share one of their favorite stories in their native language. It was a fantastic event. We also looked at the community-run cultural and religious events that happen on an annual basis. And we have, the city has 2 Martin Luther King Jr. Day events. One is a partnership between the Baha'i Center, Beit Haverim, and United Church of Christ. And youth honored Dr. King by performing music and inviting the audience to sing along. Selected quotes of Martin Luther King Jr. speeches are included. And the event was held in city facilities in the past, but has since moved to the UCC. We also found that Mary's Woods hosts a special speaker to commemorate Martin Luther King Jr. Day. In 2020, Kent Ford, founder of the Portland chapter of the Black Panthers and the Northwest Freedom Singers, spoke about his activism, Dr. King, and the peace movement. We found that Purim events take place at Beit Haverim. Purim is a family-friendly Jewish celebration, and the celebration includes carnival, food, costume parade, cakewalk, songs, prizes, and an intergenerational telling of the Purim story with students from Beit Haverim's religious school. And we also have Italian events. The Portland Italian Film Festival takes place in Portland, as well as our Lake Theater and Cafe in Lake Oswego. And the library has promoted the Italian Film Festival in the past with displays of Italian films, and in some years by hosting supplementary events. So there could be other events that are not captured here. Again, 2020 was a difficult year to do this inventory, but these are the events that we identified that are annually occurring and open to the public at this time. And speaking of the library, I just had to say, our thoughtful collections, displays, book lists, classes, and events, the library is committed to offering opportunities for all ages to learn about other cultures, as well as see their own heritage celebrated. And it's part of what we do every day. Staff also recognize there's more we could be doing to bring attention to marginalized voices and create opportunities for cross-cultural learning, particularly after having those conversations during our outreach calls. So to conclude my presentation, it's my pleasure to share recommendations with you for new city-sponsored or co-sponsored events. Staff integrated the community input into the following recommendations with a focus on inclusion, celebrating our community's diversity, and providing opportunities for building cultural competencies. So we would like to expand on the library's annual Chinese New Year celebration and to include Lunar New Year events encompassing New Year celebrations in many East, South, and Southeast Asian cultures. We would like to recommend the city explore partnering with the Baha'i Center, Beit Haverim, and the UCC on the Martin Luther King Jr. Day celebration, and to build upon that. And we'd like to explore partnering with Respond to Racism for an annual Juneteenth event, such as inviting a speaker to present on the historical significance of the holiday. And we, in talking with the Respond to Racism representatives, it sounds like we're hoping that Juneteenth will become an annual event that we can support and participate in. And finally, a multicultural celebration. We recommend that we organize a day where all residents can celebrate their heritage and those of their neighbors with food, music, dance, and traditional clothing. We were picturing Millennium Park, and also think a parade should be considered as part of this event. And it should be noted that we won't be able to implement these events in person until the COVID pandemic has passed. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you. And staff will incorporate any feedback you have to revise this proposal before proceeding to collaborate to deliver and promote events. So I will pause and take any questions that you may have.
Melissa, yeah, there you go. Thank you. Councilman.
First of all, I want to thank you. This is so awesome. In this year of 2020, where it seems like all we're doing is either catching up or falling behind or dealing with great negativity, to see something positive like this in my packet just made my day. So thank you for all the work that went into this. It's awesome. I love parades. So maybe in 2022, there's Lunar New Year parade and a multicultural parade. I'm not saying that we'll do this. I'm just saying it would be a very interesting way to promote to the community these issues. So less of a question than a thank you for this positive, fabulous work that you've done.
Well, thank you. And I have to return that thanks to you as the council for giving us this task. And Allison, maybe you'd like to say a few words, because I know when you were having conversations with the different community representatives, a number of them made comments about how happy they were. Would you like to share just a few words?
Yes, so it was having those conversations with different organizations around the community was really such a heartwarming and uplifting experience. They were so happy that the city is interested in doing something like this, and we're really impressed that the city council has prioritized this. So thank you.
Thank you, Allison.
I would be remiss if I may, I'm sorry, Councillor Kohlhoff, to not give a shout out to Councillor Nguyen for first introducing this idea at a long ago, seems like 10 years ago, council meeting. So thank you, Councillor Nguyen, and thank you again to staff.
Our pleasure.
Councillor Kohlhoff.
Yes, all of the above. It dawns on me that Portland has something called the Sons of Italy, and maybe we don't want to have the sons just of Italy, but those of us of Italian descent would think that multicultural day sounds fantastic. The other thing is the Muslim Educational Trust is always on the outreach. And
thank you.
And if I were to lead you somewhere, it would be over there to them.
Thank you very much. I know I was not aware of that group, and I don't believe Allison was either, or we would have tried to contact. So thank you for that.
It's huge.
Do they have the Daughters of Italy?
It's a very patriarchal society, Mayor. Let's just not get into it. But the food's good, and it's a lot of fun.
Okay. Councilor Lamont.
One of the things, and thank you, like Councilor Mann said, thank you for this great work. It's eye-opening and it's endearing to what we have here as a city and where we could go. So here's the question that I have is, we have 22 places of worship. I mean, I'm not sure any city of almost 40,000 has that many. I'm fascinated by that. And the Lake Oswego Sustainability Network has had some interfaith things. I think we should look at some sort of an interfaith celebration or something. And I don't want to put it that we have to do it. Let's just explore it, because I think the churches are wanting to get together. They need to highlight each other. We need to shine lights on the churches because they're all struggling right now. And some interfaith thing, whatever that thing is, might be a good thing for all of us.
Thank you.
Councilor Mott, we've got something like that getting started right now.
Great. Great.
Anybody else?
I like to.
Yes, Councilor Nguyen.
Yeah. No, thank you again, Melissa, and your team for putting this together. I just want to just point out, I don't know if there was maybe it was just a simple mistake, but if you go back to the second slide of your PowerPoint, maybe I misread it, but.
Would you like me to bring it up again?
Yeah, I just want, just in case, because, you know, I don't want people to maybe reference that incorrectly, but the second or third, I mean, the second slide, I believe, demographics by race.
Oh, sorry, I'm here, like we're at the end now. Yes.
So I'm seeing a huge gap that's not represented on here. It's the Asian American community, which is the largest minority community here in the city of Lake Oswego.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see it represented here. I just cross-referenced the census information, but unless I'm not seeing it on here, but it's I don't see Asian as a represented here. So I just wanted to point that out to you, because if you add the number, if you add up that math, it doesn't add up to 100%.
Well, then that must have been our mistake, and for that I apologize.
So I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you. That is a
And
definitely an omission on our part. I apologize for that.
Melissa and Allison, while we're
apologize.
on this topic, is this 2010 census data? Do you
I'll
know?
let Allison answer that one.
I believe it's 2018. I'll have to check. Let me take a look, and I'll answer that just shortly.
I just wonder how old the data is.
And I think with following up Councilor Wins, with our Chinese American community and other Asian Americans, that number, yeah, at first the Pacific Islander threw me, but I think the number is just the missing number that's in the total of 100%. So I'll just brush it up. Yeah.
It was in our council packet, though. They didn't mention the Asian American.
I don't know. But.
Yeah. Anyway, any other questions or comments? All right. Melissa, again, thank you very much. And Allison, thank you for all your work on this.
Our pleasure. Thank you so much again for putting this forward. And I look forward to taking it to the next step of starting to design those events and adding to our website to really promote what we have to offer.
Should be interesting. Councilor Lamont, did you have another
One other quick thing, and for Melissa and Allison and Martha, is that once we get to the point of the full calendar being fleshed out, let's make it a formal city calendar, because I think some events get catch as catch can in different formats and different groups. But if we have it as a city formalized calendar, I think more people will see it and go to it.
Mm-hmm.
So great.
Thank you.
All right. Next study session, City Manager Bennett, you're the presenter on this one.
And I'm not going to talk very long. You know, in your packet is the fall quarter update on your council goals. There's just a couple of things I do want to note, and then answer any questions you might have. First, I think we all talked about back in January when we went into goal setting that council goals really and initiatives really form the basis of how you spend your time together. I would say COVID kind of threw us for a loop for a few months, but if you look at your council packets for the last since July, you'll see that about 75% of your time is being spent on these council goal items. So I want you to know that the work that you do does make a difference, and it shapes how you spend your time and how city staff spend your time. The other two things I want to note is some of the goals actually we are done with. Yay! And I think that's happened since you last updated them in June. For example, the Maple Street path is improved. Now that's a work item. And Councilor Mans, I've been on it a few times. It's better. It's still not perfect. You adopted an intergovernmental strategy. You've held your mid-cycle discussion with budget committee. So some of this stuff we've actually checked off. The other thing is you're making a lot of progress on the ones that aren't done. North Anchor, you'll talk about today. Cultural events you just talked about. Parks Bond is moving ahead and all of the projects are on track. So I think you've got a lot of good work that's happened since you last updated in June. And then last but not least, I would always note that we always set a bigger table than we can actually eat. And many of the projects that we set for ourselves to consume in 2020 are really multi-year efforts. Things like the work on the climate action plan, your work on diversity, equity, and inclusion, the transportation projects that were identified. So you've made a lot of progress, but there's still quite a lot of work to go. So with that, I don't really have much more to say other than I'm happy to report that we're on track, and I'd be happy to entertain any questions you might have.
Okay, you're at least partly responsible as city manager, so thank you for your efforts.
I'm glad to, thank you. I'm glad to be responsible for forward progress. It's always a good thing.
All right. Next item for us is council business, the first of which is Ms. Slepian is going to present to us on the public services. Oh, you're alive and well.
I am. Thank you. Hopefully you can hear me. I'm having a lot of internet issues.
Yes.
So, okay. Good afternoon, Mayor and councilors. My name is Jenny Slepian, and I am the Sustainability and Management Analyst. Today, I am asking you to direct staff to prepare a resolution authorizing a rate adjustment for public services, our solid waste recycling and organics hauler. I have with me today Chris Bell, CPA from Bell & Associates, and KJ Lewis and Jason Jordan from Republic Services. As outlined in the staff report, Republic Services requested a rate increase of 12% on May 14th, 2020. Following receipt of the request, the city hired Chris Bell to complete a financial analysis and recommend options for a rate adjustment. The primary reason behind our decision to hire Chris was simply that this rate request was approximately double what was requested and awarded to Republic in 2018, not including the Metro recycling surcharge, which was also approved at that time. Our franchise agreement with Republic Services entitles them to receive a fair operating margin in Lake Oswego, which historically we have interpreted to be between 8 and 12%. This year is a challenging year for rate adjustments. The impacts of COVID on the solid waste industry are yet to be fully realized, though estimates show commercial volumes falling by around 30%, with residential volumes increasing. Metro is also considering some fee increases in 2021, though these have not yet been quantified. After reviewing Republic's financial documents, which the other presenters can speak to in more detail, it was clear that maintaining the operating margin has been heavily reliant on our commercial customers. In comparison to surrounding jurisdictions, Lake Oswego businesses pay more for container rates, while Lake Oswego residents pay less for their carts. Thus, we considered two rate adjustment options. The first one is to maintain the status quo of current ratios. This essentially means that commercial customers subsidize lower rates for residential customers, and rate increases are applied across the board. Drop boxes, because these are more of a rental service, would stay at a cost of service rate. The recommended rate increase under this option would be 3.5% for carts and containers. The second option is a gradual reduction of what we're calling the commercial subsidy. This would keep commercial container rates unchanged and increase commercial residential cart rates by 5.6%. In future years, cart rates would be adjusted while container rates remained unchanged until both services return is within a reasonable range. The proposed rate changes can be viewed on page 6 of the staff report. The staff recommendation is to go with the gradual reduction of the commercial subsidy. The reliance on commercial rates to subsidize lower residential rates is not sustainable given the temporary and permanent closures of many businesses in 2020 and the associated drop in their solid waste volumes. Equally as important, the financial difficulties being faced by Lake Oswego businesses and residents make it a challenging time to implement a large service increase for solid waste. While a 5.6% rate increase is still higher than the status quo option of 3.5%, it still falls below the 6.5% increase that was approved in 2018 and well below the 12% across the board option requested by Republic Services in May. Staff requests that the City Council instructs staff to prepare a resolution adjusting the solid waste rates under the second proposed option. Chris Bell and staff from Republic Services are also here to help answer any questions. Thank you.
Jenny, I have a question, first of all. Would you tell us, please, what are the proposed increases or not of residents and commercial? It wasn't quite clear.
Okay, under one of the options, it would be an across the board rate increase of 3.5%.
Right, what are you recommending?
I'm recommending a 5.6% increase just for residential customers and no change in rates for commercial customers.
Okay.
For the Dropbox service, which is an on-request service where you're essentially renting a Dropbox for a project that you're doing, we're just recommending a cost of service rate for that. So Republic would not make a margin off of that.
All right, thank you. That's what I wanted to know. Other questions? All right. There are no other questions. So let's how do you, I hear a motion regarding the rates? Okay, then I'll make a motion.
Oh, do you want me to make a motion?
Huh?
Do you want me to make a motion to direct staff to prepare a resolution? Oh, move to direct staff to prepare a resolution approving option 2, the gradual reduction of commercial subsidy and cost of service rate increases for Dropbox customers.
Which is what you just suggested to me. Is that right, Ms. Lupien?
That's right.
Okay. Is there a second? Okay, Council Kohoff second. Any discussion? All right, Madam Recorder, will you call the roll, please?
Mayor Studebaker,
Yes.
Councilor Mans,
Yes.
Kohoff. That was a yes. Thank you. O'Neill,
Yes.
Nguyen,
Yes.
thank you. And Lamont
Yes.
and Wendland.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
All right. Again, thank you, Ms. Lupien.
Thank you.
Next item is regulatory relief for certain items of commercial uses. And Mr. Siegel, I think you're going to talk to us about that.
And he's on his way in.
Hi, good afternoon, Mayor.
Good afternoon.
Scott Siegel, Planning and Building Services Director. This item is brought to you today by request of local businesses, and in consultation with the Lake Oswego Chamber of Commerce. The city has continuously since the beginning of the COVID pandemic reached out to local businesses to try to identify ways in which the city can assist in the limited span of control that we have. Everything from relief on temporary signs to the business assistance grants that the city's awarded. We've continued to look at ways that we can provide assistance. And heading into the fall and the winter, it's particularly important that we provide support in any way that we can, particularly for restaurants and other businesses that have been able to use outdoor space through the summer due to physical distancing requirements and public health and safety, now having to move back indoors. We are hearing from local businesses that they would like to have more space covered and potentially conditioned outdoors by either using tents or by actually constructing additions such as awnings or roof extensions to their buildings that they can use through the pandemic and possibly beyond. So we have heard from a small number of restaurants and other retailers who have asked if we can extend. There are really two parts to the proposal that's before you. One is to extend the allowance for temporary structures, temporary shelters such as tents, beyond the current 14-day limit under the Community Development Code. And secondly, to streamline, or in fact, waive the design review process for minor additions onto buildings that would provide an awning or some other canopy cover over an outdoor dining space. So we've looked at this with City Attorney Powell to see what the appropriate process would be for doing this, because as you know, just the process for amending the city's Community Development Code land use regulations is fairly extensive. those code changes go to the Planning Commission. There's a process that can take 3 to 4 months without very much public involvement at all. So what we've proposed is that if the council supports the changes that are proposed here and would direct staff to initiate the code changes working with the Planning Commission, that we would also allow the building department to issue building permits for awnings, and that the city would extend the limitation for outdoor, for tents and other temporary structures beyond the 14-day limit while the code amendments are in process. So essentially it would be retroactive. And we've confirmed that the building official does have the authority to issue building permits. That's not a conflict. And it is within the discretion of the city to suspend or deprioritize enforcement of the temporary structure limitation that exists today. So we've outlined an approach for your consideration that would accomplish this, that would streamline the process for approval of permanent weather protecting covers over outdoor dining areas, and secondly would extend the time limit for temporary shelters so that both could occur during the next 6 months, essentially through the end of May. And then we hope that this doesn't continue beyond that, but in the event that it does, and the same temporary structures are needed next fall, again, we certainly hope not, the code would be in place to allow that to happen. So in summary, the proposed code changes would, by direction of the City Council, would go before the Planning Commission. We would spend the next 2 months working through that process with them. The changes would come before the City Council, not likely before the end of the year, but shortly thereafter. And in the meantime, local businesses would have these 2 additional options available to them. These are also in addition to the seasonal outdoor dining enclosure ordinance that the council adopted earlier this year that was really meant to be more of an ongoing additional outdoor dining opportunity for businesses beyond the pandemic. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions. There's suggested language in the council report for a motion if you're inclined to do so. Thank you.
Councilman Lamont?
So this is a good approach to help the businesses in the interim. Can you clarify the end game? If somebody gets one now, they're in a temporary mode, Planning Commission cleans up what the regulations are and make sure the words are right. But if they're ongoing with this tent, when would the end come? Because you said, I think the end of COVID, or is it the governor lifting restrictions, or it is us, or what's the end date?
Yeah, so the way that this is written, as long as we're subject to, Clackamas County is subject to COVID restrictions for physical distancing. And then the timeline within that is October 21st, so again, retroactive as of tomorrow, through May 31st, tents, other temporary structures could be erected, could be used, would need to come down after Memorial Day weekend. And then for the permanent additions onto buildings, of course, those will go through a building permit process. And as long as the owner applied for those permits between, before May 31st or by May 31st, they would be able to take advantage of that. Again, subject to the overall restrictions on physical distancing under the governor's orders.
Other questions? All right. Yes, Council Wendland?
We had the person who testified earlier make some suggestions. Do we need to, do his suggestions make sense? Do we need to correct anything in here?
Well, yeah, thank you, Councilor Wendland. If the council has any general direction that you'd like the Planning Commission to consider when they go through this, or any direction that you would like to put out there right now, just so we have a clear direction. I think on the question, I didn't hear all of the Mr. Moynihan's comments, but I think it had something to do with setbacks from residential zones. Is that it?
Right.
Yeah. So currently, in the code for development in the commercial zone, say the EC zone, the downtown area, depending on which zone you're adjacent to. So if you're next to a low density residential zone, which I think his business is next to the R75 low density zone, there's a 25-foot setback for permanent structures. And if you're adjacent to a high density residential zone, I think it's a 10-foot setback. So the proposal, or at least the concept that is before you, would relax that somewhat. It would stipulate a 20-foot setback. I think on his lot, I've looked at that. There has been some history with construction on that property that we're working with them to really kind of work through a code enforcement issue there. There is space on that lot that could potentially allow for either a permanent canopy, which is what I think they were intending to establish there, or possibly a temporary shelter. We would want to have him consult with the fire marshal to see if there's enough space for that. In terms of the setback that we proposed with this ordinance or with this concept, I think some setback from residential zones is really appropriate because, this is, generally good just planning practice to have some separation. There's also the fire code that will require some separation. But if the council had any guidance in that area, open to your input and the planning commission. Yeah. David Powell.
I might add that as far as adjusting setbacks or living them and so forth, when Director Siegel mentions this is retroactive, it has sort of retroactive effect. What it really is that the city is saying, well, we won't enforce pending, these code changes being adopted, but you'll sign a release that if in fact these don't come across, then that's at your risk, not at the city's. I mention that because it's one thing to do a non-enforcement practice, but it's sort of no harm, no foul. It's affecting the commercial lot. And if in fact somehow the planning commission or council go for it, they got to take it down. It's a little bit different if you're actually affecting the setback buffers that neighbors may rely upon through non-enforcement and so forth, and having that come up. Again, it's council's choice, of course, but I'd suggest that's a little different level. Might want to consider whether setback reductions would be something going forward, such that neighbors could come in and testify about those things before they're actually implemented, as opposed to simply the awning and covering opportunity. Just a suggestion.
Yeah, and there may be fire code requirements that really override what the zoning might say too, depending on the construction.
Councilor Kohlhoff.
So you asked for a little bit of direction, and I know that especially when the economy is not at its best, there's this feeling like any regulation that stands between the person earning a profit and not is per se unreasonable. And I know that isn't the belief of our city, that the regulations have to make sense in terms of safety or some held common belief. That's one thing, and I know that everyone is safety first, but secondarily, have you thought about how, as we go through this health crisis, we get different experiences and therefore sometimes different rules, and I assume that's going to change, hopefully for the better, but maybe not. I just don't know. So we're putting people in spaces that are somewhat enclosed, less so than within a brick and mortar building. But how have you thought about how you're going to keep it so that if we get new public health guidance, which is law, how we're going to work through that on behalf of these people that are doing some temporary sort of situation?
So the responsibility, though, for complying with the Oregon Health Authority guidelines or the governor's orders is really the business. And so I don't think it would and I think we've talked about this lots and lots of times, that the individual operators are the folks who are actually responsible for complying. So essentially, all you'd be doing is saying, well, you can have this space. We're not telling you, we're not giving you authority under Oregon's regulations. Well, we're not giving you authority to violate the health authority's regulations. In other words, the business will still be responsible for complying with whatever the governor's orders and OHA tell them they have to do. Am I making sense? So,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I wanted to add, if it's all right, Councilor Koloff, in response to your question and perhaps a concern that others may have. The businesses that came forward and asked for this, they asked for regulation. They want certainty, and they also want to know that others are going to have to play by the same rules. And their concern was that if we're not proactive on this, that we'll have bad actors, and then we'll have safety concerns, and then we'll have a whole host of other issues. So what we're trying to do is provide a menu of options that are good, that are consistent with the city's comprehensive plan and your policy and your direction for business assistance and maintaining community standards. And then from there, Oregon Health Authority and other, fire code, building code, other requirements still apply.
I really appreciate that. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Councilor Wendland.
Well, thank you for putting this together, because I think this is a very important to help our businesses, restaurants in the city. I was just down in the Bay Area and was in Palo Alto, Menlo Park, and Mountain View. And I mean, they've closed off complete streets and figured out how to get restaurants to stay open. And they were busy, and granted it was 91 degrees and it was sunny, but they are getting ready for the winter season. And they have, I looked at things and I talked to a couple restaurant managers while I was down there about this, because I knew this was on the docket. And they all said, yeah, the cities are working with us because they want us around after this whole thing, leaves us. So, and we need to keep going. And I would just, I'm all big. I want the building and fire and life safety code requirements to absolutely be in effect, and we don't budge from there. But if there is any discretion where there may be a specific, need that we could reach, where a restaurateur could be maximize their capacity without going over the line, I think we need to be supportive, because I really feel that this is going to be, what did he call it, the dark days, or the winter days of winter are going to be hard on restaurants. And I know a lot of restaurants have pivoted, and they're doing everything they can to stay in business. And with the governor's direction on occupancy rates, they need more tables. And I think, we as Lake Oswegans hopefully will support them, but we need to give them every chance that we possibly can. So that's where I'm at with it.
Yeah, one last thing though, before you go on, I think also he made mention of allowing tables in the right of way. We can do that administratively already. And in fact, we have done it for several restaurants administratively already. So you can encourage any business owner you talk to, if it's a public street or a parking strip that's publicly owned, have them come in and talk to us. And as long as we can maintain safe travel, we can do it.
Right. And I love the idea, Scott or Director Siegel, that in the big picture, we're looking at consistency and we're looking at fair playing rules for everybody, which I think is absolutely essential. And I thank you for being ahead of the curve on this. And while it's only almost the end of October, I think we're hopefully this will be a toolbox that they can use to survive. So,
Councilor Mott.
I'll make a motion if we're ready.
Yes.
I move to direct staff to prepare an ordinance for review by the Planning Commission. 1, exempting awnings and canopies over outdoor dining areas from design review during COVID-19. And 2, replacing the 14-day restriction on temporary shelters with a longer time frame for certain commercial uses during COVID-19, similar to the time frame for outdoor dining enclosures.
Second.
Okay, any further comment or discussion? All right, Madam Recorder, will you call the roll, please?
Yes, Mayor Studebaker
Yes.
and Councilors Mans,
Yes.
Koha,
Yes.
O'Neill,
Yes.
Wynn,
Yes.
Lamont,
Yes.
and Wendland.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. All right, Mr. Powell, it's your turn now. Talking to us about an appeal.
Thank you, Mayor. This is the findings, conclusions, and order in AP 20-01. Council, you'll recall that you had a public hearing on a tree code appeal on October 6th, and you tentatively decided to affirm the Development Review Commission, which had denied the tree removal permit for a couple of trees at 381 9th Street. So affirming that decision continues and implements the denial of those permits. The findings, conclusions, and order that are presented here finalize your tentative decision. And so the recommendation is to adopt those findings, conclusions, and the order. And I'm glad to answer any questions.
Questions, anybody?
Can I move to adopt the findings, conclusions, and order for AP 20-01 as presented?
Second?
Is there a second?
Yes.
Okay, Councilor Mims. Any discussion? All right, call a roll, please.
Mayor Studebaker,
No.
Councilors Mance,
Yes.
Kohoff,
Yes.
O'Neill,
Yes.
Wynn,
Yes.
Lamont,
Yes.
and Wendland.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-1.
Okay, I'm going to make a motion to approve the minutes as written for September 8th special meeting, for our September 15th regular meeting, and for October 2nd special meeting. Councilor Lamont, you're going to second that? Okay. Councilor Lamont second that. Any discussion? All right, call the roll.
Yes, Mayor Studebaker,
Yes.
Councilor Mance,
Yes.
Kohoff,
Yes.
O'Neill,
Yes.
Wynn,
Yes.
Lamont,
Yes.
and Wendland.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
All right, next item is of business is information from council. Does anybody have anything they want to tell us?
Let's see. Information?
Well, our comments.
Oh, comments. Oh, can I?
I had an impression you wanted to make a comment here, Councilor.
Is this well, can I do a question? Yeah, it's more, and this is directed at Mr. Powell is over in this corner. Sorry, he moved little boxes. Where did he go? Where did he go? No, I've just had a number of inquiries and questions from a number of people, emails and whatever, on our responsibility as a council and a city verifying the eligibility of mayoral or city council candidates that want to be in the election. And would you explain, if you could, do we have the roles of the city and how we verify and what council can and cannot do? There is a possible issue that has been brought to the attention of all of us with a number of emails, and a number of people are asking, why aren't you responding, Councilor Wendland, and why aren't you doing something? And so I thought it would be apropos to bring the question to all of us so that you could give us your wonderful advice, as you always do, to make things much clearer for all of us.
Well, thank you. I'll try. It's interesting there, as far as the city's function and or the council's function when it comes to eligibility of candidates, there's a threshold level where the city elections officer either accepts candidacies for the ballot or does not. And that's essentially a ministerial function. The candidates certify on a couple of documents. One is a state form of candidacy that they are eligible for the office. And they also sign a second local document that says specifically that they meet the qualifications for the office. In the case of mayor, it includes that they have resided continuously in the city for at least 12 months prior to the election. Typically, upon those certifications, the elections officer, and included, I think, in most jurisdictions, does not engage in an investigation unless there of those things. In a particular case that's got a lot of attention currently, there was the issue of whether property had been purchased outside the city and annexation pending and so forth. And so the elections official did ask for supporting documentation. And without going through all of that, what was presented was all consistent with the representation that the candidate had made as to residency and so forth. At least had the same addresses, and there were no inconsistencies. Also, a statement from the candidate himself that his residency had been within the 12-month continuous period in Lake Oswego, and from his legal counsel. So based on that and no contrary submittals, the elections official appropriately certifies the name for the ballot. Once that happens, it's kind of over in that sense. If questions come up after the ballot deadline is concerned, the elections official has no authority at that point to and cannot physically pull someone off of the ballot one way or the other. And there's also not a process under city code for an investigation and so forth at that point, as that ministerial function is over. The question then what comes up, and we've seen questions about that too, about, well, if I believe the candidate does not meet those residency qualifications in spite of those certifications and so forth, isn't there something the city council can do? Well, the charter spells out the specific roles there and when they occur. And it does say that the city council is the final judge of the qualification and election of its own members. Reading all the charter provisions together, though, it makes it clear that it means the city council of which the person would be the member, because it does provide the process. And that is that there are various things that can happen where someone's not eligible to be on council, but specific to elections, an elective office can be declared vacant by the city if the person elected or appointed fails to qualify, therefore, within 10 days after the time for his or her term of office is to commence. And so it really is, the two sections of the charter that are read together make it clear that is the process. And in the case of continuous residency, obviously that 10-day thing isn't too meaningful, but it would be the council. I thought I heard someone ask. I would be the council then in January, if in fact that issue was raised then about a candidate, or about someone who had been elected, I should say, to then be the judge of the qualifications. So for those who are saying, why can't the current city council do something? Frankly, there is not a process or authority in the charter or in law for the council to do something. It has no authority to conduct a hearing or subpoena information and so forth. And it really would be that 2021 council that would make that determination. There are also processes under state law for election challenges, but those are court challenges, not city challenges.
So what you're saying then is the present council cannot make any decision on that election qualification. It would have to be the council that started their service after January 1 of 2021, correct?
That's correct. That council would do it, and if it found someone did not qualify, they would then declare a vacancy in that position.
All right, thank you. Any questions, anybody? Thank you. You did make that clear. Thank you, Mr. Powell. Okay. The next item is reports of officers. Anything? All right. Then we are now adjourned for a few minutes, and then Mr. Powell, we're going to go into executive session. So could you talk to us about that, please?
You may want to first call the meeting of the Lake Oswego Redevelopment Agency Board into session.
I think that's a good idea. So we are adjourned to City Council, and I'm going to call the LORA Board, Redevelopment Agency, meeting to order. And now, Mr. Powell, we're going to go into executive session, so can you read us some spiel on that?
Thank you, Mayor. I will. This time, the Board of the Lake Oswego Redevelopment Agency will meet in executive session pursuant to ORS 192.6600, subsection 2E, to conduct deliberations with persons designated to negotiate real property transactions. Representatives of the news media and designated staff will be allowed to attend the executive session. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on or otherwise disclose any of the deliberations or anything said during the executive session. No final decision will be made in the executive session. And at the end of that session, the board will return to an open session.
All right, we'll take a break for 5 minutes. Is that long enough for everybody?
And then Mayor Studebaker, if I may just mention, I'm going to go ahead and close out this meeting. So all of you will be leaving this meeting. You will rejoin the executive session under the second login information that you received by email.
Thank you.
Thank you.